Hello, and thank you to my committee for your time today. My problem of practice is one that is both exciting and frightening for organizational leaders. My goal in today's presentation is to share with you, number one, the problem of practice, number two, why it is important, number three, what the literature says about the problem, and with my own experiences and through the lens of the Clark and Estes framework, I will then discuss the proposed research methodology to diagnose gaps in knowledge, motivation, and organizational barriers for the stakeholders. By running these gaps through the conceptual framework, I've designed a research study to gain rich data that will lead to solutions. So, sit back in your chair and think about the revolution. Revolution? Did she say revolution? As you stare at one another through Zoom. Yes, we are in the midst of what many experts are calling the fourth industrial revolution. Information. Now, before we continue, allow me to share a little background on myself. I began selling communication technology for a small company named MCI when the internet and cell phones hadn't been invented yet. I know that dates me, but I remember way back when working with Kohler Plumbing on the job site, and contractors needed to figure out, should I cut the faucet hole 3 inches above the sink or 5 inches? What is the height of the shower head? Time is money, and they would have to go into the construction trailer and use the fax machine. And after a beep, buzz, a spec sheet slowly rolled out on that weird paper, one of thousands in their product line, and typically fell under the cabinet. To today, where not only can a contractor find it on his phone, but consumers can design their kitchens and baths, find products to purchase, and through all of that evolution, the next generation would be that Kohler can harness all of that consumer information and preferences and create strategic vision for their company based on knowledge of the next generation. So through all the years in tech sales, I have experienced one glaring and consistent issue. When technologies arose, and they always did, those that were transformative and likely expensive, when presented to the IT group or somebody, they usually got it. They saw the need, the value, but as the decision moved up the organization to the CEO or C-level, perhaps the CFO, the value of the technology was often misunderstood or drilled down to, how much is this thing going to cost me? Famous question. Instead of a cultural acceptance of, we need this transformative technological change solution to survive and thrive. Therein lies the problem. So let me give you a little background of the industry. Data science, there's a lot of acronyms and names that will be sprinkled through the dissertation. So let me decipher a little bit of the code. Data, big data, they call that BD, enormous data, true and actual term. Artificial intelligence, AI, data analytics, logistics, those are all some of the names. But whatever the name, it is the information and ability to harness it that is transforming society. There's no better example of this than Jeff Bezos and Amazon. But let's look back to the first industrial, second, and third industrial revolutions. I wasn't around for the first industrial revolution, but what disruptions did occur were that the 18th century brought steam engines and railroads. Henry Ford disrupted the industry with the automobile and assembly line. Then Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, an invention of the internet, disrupted for globalization of computer and internet-based knowledge, which leads to this fourth revolution of harnessing it to artificial intelligence and solving solutions. Next level. This information comes from digital bits, a myriad of sources. Every retail transaction you make, your entire healthcare history on hospital records, your smartphone, your social media footprint, according to Team. In other words, all the bits of information floating around can be used for business intelligence. And there are many facets. This fact alone puts it in perspective. Van Loon reported that 90% of the data in the world today has been created in the last 2 years alone. So there is obviously an urgent need for a specific framework on how to cultivate a data-driven organization using KM&O as pain points through the Clark and Estes framework. It's important to address because by 2025, according to King, an estimated 100 billion devices will be connected. So I've narrowed down the industry, and I bring you back to Jeff Bezos. One of the main key industries that has been hit with lack of technology or proper use of technology is consumer goods industry. The large consumer goods manufacturers have seen decline in growth since 2011. According to Henrik Little Martinez Sean Sekel, total return to shareholders, TRS, has lagged because the sales channels are fragmenting. People aren't shopping at the mall or at the big box stores. They're shopping online. It's been disrupted, and the millennial effect on retail revolution, home delivery. The growth model was big beats small is transforming to fast beats slow, which is why I've narrowed down the focus to C-level executives and CEOs in the consumer goods industry. They need to embrace data-driven cultural change to survive. As a field-based study, I will focus on several high-level executives and qualitative research. The CEO responsibility is the rationale is why I've made them the population of focus, and literature found the following. Number one, CEOs have knowledge gaps in procedural and metacognitive skills on the topic. They need procedural knowledge to effectively identify, communicate, and implement data-driven cultural strategies. They need the ability to develop self-reflection metacognition mechanisms to drive solutions in real time. They're not used to this. They've been insulated. It's all new. As far as motivation, they need to resolve motivation gaps of self-efficacy and goal orientation to differentiate their organizational culture toward data. It's a pivot, especially in retail and consumer goods. They need to use goal orientation to become a leader. And then the third, the gaps in cultural models and settings. There's a huge one, which is a culture of trust. CEOs are used to maybe perhaps dealing with their intuition that they have all the answers because they're the CEO and they've been in practice doing this their way for so long. So they have to have a culture of trust up and down. Do we trust the science, the data? Data is science. Do we trust answering solutions this way? Allocation of proper resources, another big one, of course. Money for budgets to reinforce their commitment to the strategy. And the importance of learning for leaders and peers in the data space. The research questions that will guide my field-based study for rich data to the CEOs. CEOs' main goal, performance objective, is to improve shareholder value, return on shareholder value, and to produce a product that consumers like. They optimally want to do it better than anyone else in the field. So to drive these research on this, number one, what are the stakeholder knowledge, motivation, and organizational barriers related to achieving this goal? Number two, what are recommendation practices in KM&O? And number three, what are the recommendations for resources for KM&O? Interviewees committed at this time are for my professional and personal interactions and the knowledge they have to offer, and I'm honored. I have a CIO of a Fortune 500 consumer goods manufacturer, president of a Fortune 158, a senior VP of a Fortune 500, and a CEO. So I'm honored to get rich data from them, and I've created an instrument that will allow me to hone in on all of those KMO gaps to find solutions. It will be an inductive approach to reveal the gaps, and I will thematically code and interpret the data to enable the framework, which I'm most excited about, is enable a process framework to be used at an executive level for data-driven cultural and transformational enablement. So I have to understand the intersectionality, and I've created my instruments for that, and I feel that this can use the gap model of Clark and Estes to identify root causes with several key high-level executives at Fortune 500 consumer goods manufacturers. I will create recommendations and an implementation and evaluation plan included in the study. This study will add to the body of knowledge on guiding cultural change with specificity towards driving cultural change in today's data-permeated world. Other companies and government entities may find this study helpful as well in attempting to drive organizational change in their own world. But I remind you, over 90% of the world's data has been created in the last 2 years alone, and over 100 billion devices will be connected by 2025. Yes, there is no doubt we are in the fourth industrial revolution, information. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.